Yeah, all right. So, yeah, first thing, any doubts in Docker volumes? Did you practice, any questions, any doubts you have? If yes, let me know now. If no, we'll move to next topic.
Not no, bro.
Okay, so then let's go to new topic. Today we talk about something called networking. So, what is Docker networking? And how it works, what is the use of that? Let's see those. So basically, what is the point of networking is like, sorry, in order to communicate with each other, we need networking, right? That's what we do. When your network is high or something like that, usually we see because there's in order to communicate, with others, it can be, person, it can be, some infra. So we need networking. Similar way in Docker also. We have two containers or more containers or 10 something. How they communicate each other if they want. If we want to communicate each other, I mean, I have two containers. I want them to talk to each other for some reason. For some reason, it can be your use case. Maybe your application and database containers are running. You want them to talk to each other, obviously, because they need to communicate and share the data and everything in order to work. So how you set up that? How it works based on the networking. So now here, as I told you, so each and every container is like isolated, right? So we have a concept called networking in Docker where by default it leaves the Docker, whenever we create containers, it leaves the default network and all the containers will run in that network. I mean, we can create our own, we can run the containers in our own network, but default there is one. So it will automatically run the containers in that one. So what happens here is like since everything is running in a default network, every container have communication with each other. We'll try that, don't worry. You'll see it, how to check and all. And here networking means obviously every container will get an IP address. So if you inspect the container, you'll see what is the IP address of the container. So first, let's create a sample container first. Some sample. Let's, so we have test. Let's create one more. Maybe test one. So it's the running, right? Let's inspect one container. What this will do is Docker inspect will show you the information of the container. Are there any volumes attached to it? What is the image that is using? What is the port number that is binded to? What is the host name? What is the name of the container, network, IP, and everything? It will show you. You can inspect lots of information. Obviously, first is IP address. If you see, this is the IP address of this container. But these are all the information it will show you. See, images obviously. We didn't use any volumes or null. Entry point is null. We didn't get anything because we just took from the base image. We didn't. We're just using the existing image. That's it. These are all the information it will show you. Status also, yeah, run it. Now you saw the IP address of this container. Let's check the test to another container, test one. See, so with this IP address, you can communicate each other with these two containers. So first, let me go to one container, test container, let's say. How to check the network communication? There are multiple commands. So these are all, like commands are there like ping, telnet, and NS lookup for DNS resolution, and there is a dig command to get the IP address. There are multiple commands. We can use ping or telnet just to see if the communication is there or not. Let's try. I'm installing ping. By default, ping won't be available. Ping is there. Yes, ping is there. What is the IP address of test one? I think 172. Let's go here. Let's wait. This is the one, right? 72, 1703. 172.17.0.3. We're getting the response. That's the response. 64 bytes from the IP address. Let's ping with the host name. Test1 service unknown. This is not the host name. This is the container name. What is the host name? Let's see in output. Somewhere it will be. Somewhere, where is it? Yeah, this is the host name. Container ID is the default host name, obviously. So let's paste it. Now ping. Name or service unknown. Still it is not identifying because we didn't set any container name, right? It took the ID as a container name. It cannot resolve that. So we have to set a dedicated host name, then it will work. But IP is working, if you see, because IP works. There is no need to do anything for the IP. If you may ask, like, we didn't set up any network anything, but how they are communicating each other? You can go here. You can go to, let's say, test one container. I mean, test one container. Install ping. This is the package name of ping. Installing. Yeah. Now I have to ping the test container 172.17.0.2. So I'm getting the response. How it is? I mean, how they are working exactly. I mean, even without, I didn't do anything. Default. How it is working is there is already a default network as I mentioned, right? There, every container is using the same network. Since if they're in the same network, they can communicate without any issues. If they're in a different network, then we might need to set up something like, let's say, any example, like if you are in the same network, you can communicate each other. If you are on a different network, it will be difficult. We need to establish a communication between them. Then only the communication works. Got it? This general concept of networking, I mean. So now let's see in Docker what are networks, how many types are there, what are the use of those. So let's see all of this. So we have 4 types of networks. So one thing is bridge, another thing is host, none, overlay. So these are the 4 types of networks we have. Well, we'll go on by one. So let's start with bridge. What is the use of bridge network here? This will be useful to communicate and to establish a communication between containers, but within a single host. within the same host. It means I have a server now, machine, right? And I'm running Docker inside that. I have multiple containers, obviously, maybe more than 10 or 20 something. So bridge network will help you communicate those 10 or 20 containers within a single server only. So within a single machine only, bridge network will work. No matter how many containers are there within a single server, bridge network will establish connection to all of them. So simple. Establish communication between pods within single host. Host, server, machine, all are same. It's my laptop. Imagine just as a sample example, my laptop is here. I'm running Docker in my laptop. I created 10 to 20 containers or 100, let's say. Bridge network will establish communication between all of them, all of the 100 containers, but which are running within my laptop. Let's say I have some other machine also, that won't work. So communication with another host, that won't work. So bridge is just to establish communication between pods, sorry, not pods, I'm into Kubernetes, sorry, containers within single host. So it means we have two, right? So bridge network will establish communication between these two parts within this machine, whatever, no matter how many parts are running. By default, they are running in the bridge network. Bridge is the default network. How do I know? Just type Docker network ls. So the bridge network. There is another two also will go there, but bridge network is the default driver bridge. How to see in which network my these things containers are running? Simple, inspect. Docker inspect test. I mean the container, obviously. Check here. See the name of it. So then we can create our own network and we can run our containers in that. Docker, obviously just like volumes, Docker network create. What is the name of the network? Maybe test, simple as an example. Here one argument we have to pass called driver. Well, what is the driver mean? We have, I told you, right, four types are there. Which type of network you are creating, that we have to pass. That's we call driver. I want to bridge network, right? Which the one we are discussing. So the network type is bridge now. The name is test. Docker network, let's type. See, test network is there. Now we can create our own container in this one. Let's run. Sorry, let's run hyphen d hyphen something. Sorry, let me Docker run hyphen IP. Now you know how to pass a name and everything. How to pass a network now. So simply how you pass hyphen net. Or you can pass like this or hyphen n, like this we can pass. Anything whichever is fine. So let's say to keep it simple, hyphen network. What is the network name? Test. And when the image name is, so I'll pass the name also. I'm inside a container. Let's come out of the container. Docker inspect test 11, I guess. Sorry, 11. The test network. I'm inside this. See the IP address. Now 18. Just a minute. Just a minute. So now this is a different IP address. One minute, one minute. I'm getting this out. Yeah. So now simple. Even though we created our own network now, we ran our container in our network. We can able to communicate with this. What is the IP address of this? 18.0.2. Let's go to any container. Let's say attach the test, the first one which we created. Ping 172.18.02. I think it's correct. Yeah. Let's see. See, not communicating. Observe here. Why? Because they are running in two different networks. One is bridge from by default network. Another is sorry, this one. What is it? The test which we created. Correct.
So if we don't specify network, by default on which network it will,
If you
I mean,
don't
one
specify
container will
anything, the
run.
default bridge, as I told you, right?
Okay.
Where is this? Yeah, this is the default. This is the default bridge. It will take you. I mean, so if you are no, sorry, what is it? If you are creating your own network, and if you are like run, sorry, this container in your own networks, then create your network. I mean, creation is still not in. There is one more command also. But yeah, so now you may get a doubt, right? For now, let's see. We created our own network, correct? How to? There is no connection. I mean, obviously, I've seen it. But how to do now? What to do? So usually, what we do is Docker network connect test network, I guess, right? Yeah, test network, and the container is test. Simply, what we're doing is, I mean, Docker inspect test. We are attaching our own existing network also. Now they are in the same network. Now let's go to test. Ping 172.18.0, sorry, 0.2. So they are communicating like this. Usually, I mean, this is the case. Let me tell you what is the case. We don't create multiple Docker networks in a single machine. No, we don't create it. We'll create only one network. We'll use that for every container. So it means one network, every container will run in same network, so they have a communication. No need of creating another network. I mean, I mean, people don't use the default, mostly use the default or don't use the default. But if they don't want to use the default, they'll create one more network and they'll run all the containers in that network. No, we won't run like no one runs like containers in two different networks. There is no point of that. You see, what is the point of here? Like if there is no communication, because you have to set up the communication between those two networks now. It's an additional layer. So there is no point of that one. That's why usually what people do is, I mean, to keep it simple, we create our own network. Obviously, that's what we did, right? So using and we run the containers in our machine. Still, I mean, Docker network concept is there. Like we created network, right? Docker create the test network I use. And what is the IP it gave us? Docker maybe like this. I'm not sure this work. Yeah, it worked. This is the range it gave you. 172 blah blah something. Yeah, sorry, not this. This is the range it gave you. Subnet range. You didn't like this. Maybe you want to create network, your own network, with some other range, IP address range, 192 something or 10 something. So you can create like that also. Docker network create. You have to simply pass an argument. So what is it? Hyphen driver, right? Hyphen D. You can pass bridge, and you have to pass the subnet range. Maybe like 192. Sorry, 168. My bad. Sorry. 192.168 dot 0.0/16. Hyphen IP hyphen range. We are giving the IP ranges 192.168.20.0/24 means whatever the containers we are running, it will start with this range 192.168.20.1234 something until 256 like this. And hyphen gateway. So the gateway is like what is the point of contact for the network. So it will be 192.168.20.1 for the first IP address will be. And what is the network name? Cell simply. It's created. If it's created, see cell is there. Inspect it. Okay, there is command already. It's like our own network, our own address range, right? So these are, how do we know this? I mean, you may ask, what is this? How do we know this? What is IP range? These are concept of, IP classes and ranges. And, subnet mask, how many IPs will get. Since it's a very common ID, so I use it the same thing. Now what happens is we created our own network with our own range, IP range, not the default which Docker gives for us. When you create a network, Docker will give 172 range, 172.18, 172.19 something. I don't want that range. I want to use my own range. So I use 192. Now if you run a container in this, obviously the IP will be 192.168.20.1, obviously. The 20.2, sorry, or 3. Let's try. Docker run hyphen name new hyphen network, or simply you can use hyphen self, sorry, hyphen name is already done, sorry, Ubuntu 2.04. Did I miss something? Hyphen n created, come back. What is it? New, sorry. See the IP 0. Like this. It's our own network, our own range will come. So like this. I mean, I never created an office obviously with our own range. I told you right. We don't really use this networking concept because it's not required. You already have a network, default network. You can use that, or create your own bridge network. You can use that. You don't need to have your own ranges. I mean, some might use, but I never used it. But that's okay. So it's about bridge network. I mean, bridge network is just used to communicate between the containers within the same host. So like this, you can create your own bridge network, and you can create, you can, check it whether it's running or not. There is one more command, let's say, as an example. Well, As of now, what we did while running the container, we're passing the network. My scenario is, sorry, one minute. My scenario is like, I have already running containers. See, apart from this new, I have three containers which are running in different networks. I want I want to change these networks of these things. How to change? Well, you can't change the existing one, but you can add a new network to this one. Let's say test. First inspect test. Enter. See, network. It has two networks by already. We can add one more network here. How to add? Simple Docker network connect. What is the network name? Self, right? What is the container name? Test. So what happens here is, see, test came, self network, it is attached, or bridge network. Now what happens is that this container is running in, I mean, it's running with three networks attached. So now this can communicate to any container within these three networks. If you want to communicate with other container which is in a different network within the same host, this is the option. You have to connect to a network to a container. But you can add multiple networks. There is no issue with that. It won't throw any issue like that. Got it? You want to disconnect a network. I mean, I have already three networks. I don't want one, maybe I don't want the test or a bridge. Docker, same thing. The network disconnect. Let me check this file. Earlier you connected. Now disconnect. Now, what is the network? Test network. What is the container? Sorry, test container. In fact, the test is gone. Only bridge and self is like this. You can connect and disconnect the network to a running container. There's no problem. Got it? If you want to delete a network, Docker network RM, obviously. What is the name? Test the network name. It won't work because containers are running in that network. So you want to delete a network, you have to delete the containers first, then only. So let's delete containers. Now delete the network. Test self. I think this one we created. See, gone. These are a default. That's about the bridge network. Now let's come to host. Host is simple. When you run a container, as I told you just now, it will run inside the Docker network, right? Bridge network by default. Let's say you don't want to run the container in Docker network. You want to run the container directly in the host network. So you have a host network obviously. Inside that you have a Docker network. Within the Docker network, the containers are running. That's how you usually do. So if you want to run, let's say a container within the host network itself, you can use the host network. Let me show you a small how it looks like. Maybe let's say this one. Yeah. So there is the text here. This is your server. So obviously there will be a network here, some network, and this is your container, a Docker network, Docker, and inside the Docker network is there. So if you access, what happens generally, the request first will come to the server network, right? And once the port mapping is done, obviously you know what is port mapping. The request will go from server to Docker network, where whatever the container it has, it will talk to that based on the port mapping. So now my scenario is I don't want to use Docker network. I mean, I want to run a container, but not in this network. I want to run in server network. Why? One step is reduced for me now here. See, no need to count twice. Twice means two steps. There are two steps in order to communicate to the network. One is touching the server network. Another is, I mean, host network, obviously. So on another is Docker network. After that, container will come. So now I don't want to use that. I want to run the Docker container. Maybe a sample thing. Usually Docker containers will be here, like this, within the Docker network. Maybe one container I want to run within the host, like this, outside the Docker container, like this. These containers run directly on the host network. So now, when we access, those containers, directly the request will go to the host network and talk to containers. No need of going to Docker network now, because those containers are running on the host, not in Docker network. So no need of those going to Docker container. So that's the advantage, I would say, maybe, of this one. But there is one small issue here actually. What is the issue? Usually, when we run in a Docker network, we need to map the ports, right? The host port and the container port, we need to do mapping so that network data, I mean, traffic will transfer. In the server network, when you run, there is no port mapping. It's because it's not required. It's a single network now, correct? So you have to use the host port itself. There is no, you don't need to define the port. So what happens is it will use the default container port as a host port and use it. Usually what happens is we ran multiple Ubuntu containers. I'll show you that, but yeah, let's see. Usually we'll run multiple network containers with the same port number, right? Same container port. There won't be any issue. We tried it already. But host port must be unique. So this is the concept when you run inside a Docker network. But now there is no need of host port and all. When you run your container in a host network, I mean in a server network, no need to define a ports. It's just one network now. Directly we are running in the server network, and whatever the container port is, that will be used. That will be used. So we can use that to access it by default. But we cannot run multiple containers because now when you're running in the host, let's say you ran Jenkins container or Tomcat container in a normal Docker bridge network, a normal Docker container. What happens? We have to map it, maybe 8081, 82, something like that. But in server, you can run only one container because it will use the container port as the main port to access. Let's say that scenario why it is happening. Let's try. Let's say let's Docker which one? One minute. Come on. Let's new window. Yeah, it came. So Docker run -d -p maybe 8080 port number 8080 -n Tomcat colon 9 right. Let's run this container. Yeah, obviously it will pull it. So now what's happening here? We are running the image in a Docker network. Obviously, we didn't mention anything. Sorry, port already in use. So let's use the different port per host. No. The Docker container is running, right? A Tomcat is running. Now I'll run another Tomcat server with a different host port. 82. Again, I can run another Tomcat, right? See, like this, I can run same Tomcat server multiple times. Bec- But container port is same. Even though there won't be any issue, even though it's same. Why? Because when you run in this network, isolation will come to you. Isolation ID concept will come to containers. So that these are all running in separately. I mean, within the same network only, but there won't be any issue because Docker provides you that isolation concept. If you run containers in Docker network, you can just simply change the host port. Obviously, host port has to be unique. You can't run two services in the same port. That's not possible. Anyway, not just in Docker. Now, let me run. Let's remove this. So it's running, obviously, you know this concept. Yeah. Now what happens? I'll run Tomcat container on -d in host network or net, both are same. You can define like this also, like this, no worries. So network host, this is the host network, right? And what is the name? Tomcat. What is the image? Tomcat :9, I guess. It won't work. Sorry, my spelling wrong. It's running. What's happening here is it is using the 8080 port by default. When you run in host network, obviously, what happens? It will run in your server network directly. It will get your server IP only. And what is the port? I never did mention anything. It leaves the container port. Let's try to create one more thing. Let's see. It's created. See, but it stopped. Why? Let's see. Check the log. Sorry, sorry. What is error here? Address already in use. I told you, right? There is no isolation here now. If you run your container, sorry, in a host network, there is no isolation. So we are running one here, one container. We started one container. We didn't mention any port. We can't even mention any port because this automatically identifies the container port, whatever the container port inside it, 8080 by default, right? It will take that automatically. We don't need to mention anything. And now you're running the container without port. Even though you define a port, it won't take. But the port number is already being used by container. So what is the rules of using what host? Port must be unique. So you can't run two containers with the same port. But containers by default internally uses 8080 because that's the default port of Tomcat. We can't change that unless we build our own image. We change the port number in the configuration files. So there won't be any isolation. Let's create another container, hyphen p 8089 something as an example. See, publishing ports are disabled when using host network mode because you can't publish the ports. It stopped. There is no isolation here. And why this is working is when you run in a host network, you're running in your server network. It means you're running in a server network. There is no isolation. So you can use only one container with whatever the port number it has. It won't provide you isolation. And when you run in a bridge network, I mean Docker network, it's provide you isolation so that no matter what is the container port, it can be same for 1,000 containers. They still be isolated. There won't be any issue like this. So when we use the host network, sometimes even we used to run a cron job. We don't want, we want to run only one container for that application. At that time, we have used this host network to keep it simple. Like we want to run a cron job, correct? So what happens in the scenario is through cron job we're running a script to fetch something. So the request will come to net host network and from host to Docker network. So we thought it's slow. We thought it was slow. So we created a container running host network. Since anyway I don't need the isolation anything. So one container is fine for me. I ran in a host network like this. And the request commit host network to my container directly. So it was faster. That's the only case we have used. So that's the thing I wanted to say like about the host network. You don't need to do anything for this. Simply define hyphen network host. That's it. It will run you in the host network. Let's inspect this. Sorry, network host. There is no IP address because IP address is the server IP address. What is the IP address of this? This is the 172.31. This is IP. This IP only will come to Docker. I mean, no need to specify here, mention directly. So that's called host network. Runs your container directly on host network. I mean, host means wherever you're the server, wherever you're running this. So mostly, in most cases, we don't use it, the host network, unless maybe a specific scenario. Unless maybe, as I told you, right, a specific requirement which comes to run, to need a single container, we will be running on the host network. Because isolation will be gone when you run that. You can't use different ports on the same application multiple times. No, it's not possible. Only one. So that's about the host network. Next is none. None by name you already know. We're not, yeah, sorry. We're not assigning any network to that simple, to a container. It means we're running a container without any network. Rise, no, hyphen D, let's say, hyphen net, sorry, yeah, network, none, tomcat 9, ps minus a. It will run obviously, but we cannot access this anywhere. Why? Because we gave as none, no network for this. Docker inspect maybe this. The name Brave Shabir it seems. None network, no IP address, nothing. If you want to run a container without any network, I don't want any network for that container. You can use none. No one can access this. I never used it, obviously. Maybe it might be helpful, like when you want to run a container for some task and delete after some time. But it does not require network communication. It does not need to connect to anything. Internally, it has some task without connecting to any outside thing. And the time you can use it. I never got the scenario like that, but yeah, you can try it.
So like for schedule kind of
Yeah,
job,
you
we
can
can
try
use
it.
this container,
But if
right?
the schedule a job, whatever the job we are scheduling needs access to outside resources, then it won't work. Let's say I'll schedule a job.
How about within the
No,
Docker
it won't.
network?
We defined
Oh,
explicitly as none. So no network. This container cannot talk to other containers all within the same host. No, because we gave none. Of course, we can change the network later on. Docker network connect, the network name, the container name, we can change the network, but none network we cannot connect. Maybe let's say example, I'm saying example like you running a script which creates some files, which creates some directory. These creating files and directories does not require the outside access, right? Internally, it can just do touch or mkdir commands. So at the time, it may be useful. Any task which does not need to communicate with other containers, communicate with the server or anything, you can run, you can use this whole none network in order to do the task. Why to bother, creating a container when we just create a sample Jenkins freestyle job to do our task? It's as simple as that. So no one uses the network. I mean, but it exists. That's the whole point. So is it clear? I mean, there is nothing to do in the non network, obviously.
Yes.
We cannot do anything for that. So is it clear?
Yes.
Now, none, obviously nothing. So no runs without a network, obviously. I mean, it's a network, one of the network type, but there is no networking. I mean, there is no communication at all. So next one will be on your hand. But yeah, I'll explain what is this. You have to try it. So what is bridge now? I mean, so far, let's say we have discussed three networking concepts, but still we are in the same host, right? So bridge network establishing communication between containers within the same host, I mean, same mission. Host also similar, we are just running a container in the host network without Docker network. None, nothing at all. But now I got a scenario that I have two missions, of course, two missions, and few Docker containers are running in those machines. Now I want to communicate one container from machine one to talk to, to communicate to another container in machine two. Different servers now. How to do that? At that time, this overlay will come. Establish a communication between containers within not single host, multiple hosts. Multiple hosts, that's it. We have, I mean, in Office solo, we don't have one server, right? We have hundreds of servers. Maybe let's say we have, as an example, two servers. So I want to, I mean, obviously containers are running in those two servers. So I want to, communicate with those two. So at the time we use this overlay network. This overlay, when we, I mean, there is concept called Docker Swarm. Its cluster will come. It will come maybe Thursday or something, but that's okay. So when the concept comes, it will come, this network come by default, but without the Docker, that cluster or whatever. So I'm saying, if you want to set up this network, so you need to have one more server obviously, and you need to have a concept called key value stores. We have Zookeeper, etcd consoles things are there. So we have to set up the key value data store. And once the communication is done between these two servers, then you can create your this overlay network. If I try to create now, it won't work. Let's try. Come on. That's okay. Well, let's talk meanwhile. Let's see. See, this overlay will help us in communicating the containers between multiple hosts. Multiple hosts means multiple servers. But it's not a direct approach. Simply you can just do Docker network create overlay. It won't work like that. Let's try that. Docker network create -d overlay something. Maybe test. See, it won't work. By default, it won't work. We cannot create that. As I told you, there is something called Swarm. That we'll see maybe not now. Forget about that for now. But in order to use this overlay network, we have few steps. First thing is we have to set up the key value data store. Where is this? Yeah, key value data store. What it will do is we have example etcd console. What it will do is, since we are trying to establish a communication between two servers, right, so that the containers can able to talk to each other within the servers, we need a common point for those, right? Let's say two servers are there. How do each other know about, let's say server one, how does server one knows about server two, how server two knows about the one? No, right? We does not know. So we'll establish a common point between those two servers. So in that common point, we'll store the server information and everything. So now, if some let's say server two needs the information about server one, this common point is there, right? That will give. Similar way. So if server one requires something, info, this common point will be. That common point is called this key value data store. You can use any of these. So we have to configure it and use it. And once we set up this thing, then you can create, the overlay network. Now what I ask you is, try to set up this overlay network. Try to communicate between two networks. So this is present in my documentation which I shared. If you don't understand, maybe it may be old within 5 years. Try to watch a video. Try to do that maybe by tomorrow class. Got it? First, know these concepts. If you understand these concepts, what is bridge, how it works. I think it's not that complicated, but try to know these things, get a clarity on these things, then try to do overlay concept. Got it? It's in my documentation. If you don't understand, try to watch a video. Okay.
Okay.
So
this needs another
yes,
machine as well,
exactly.
right?
It's another mission. So you can set up that. You have to set up again.
Okay.
Okay. So any doubts so far?
So the another machine can be like we can use the free tier as well, right?
anything.
Micro.
It does not really matter. Anything.
Okay.
Anything. I totally right. So no requirements. Got it?
Yes.
So do practice. See, you may use it, you may not use it, but you have to know it, right? You have to know the concept. And I never use Docker network, none network. Sorry. But if someone asks you, hey, what is the none network? You have to say, like, none is nothing. We're just creating a container without a network because it does not require the access at all, networking at all. That's why. What is host? We run, this container directly on host network without involving the Docker network. So isolation will be gone. So we can run only one container, and it will use the host port, the container port to access the container. We can use that. Bridge, similar way, establish communication like this. You have to know the concepts in order to move further. Because there is one more tool will come after this. Maybe we'll start next week, maybe Monday. You need all these things. Got it? That's why whether we use it or not, it does not matter. So know it at least. So that would be enough. Good enough, I would say. So yeah, try to do this overlay network. If any doubts, ping me in the group. I may reply late, but yeah, I'll try to reply most of the time. All right. So yeah,
Yes.
let's meet tomorrow 7 a.m. Not like today. So today we don't have power. Still we don't have. So I thought it will come, but yeah, it came. Sorry, charging. Yeah, it is here. So tomorrow our usual timing. So yeah, that's fine. So yeah, bye everyone. Have a nice day. Bye.